Hello, my name is Benji and welcome to Dice vs Cards. Today we go back to Arkham Horror, the card game. We've now completed series focusing on all but one of the classes, and it's been a long and winding road, but we're here today to bring a Survivor class toolkit, detailing what cards you should strongly consider bringing with your red-bordered investigator wherever you go. We've got you covered with all the different slot choices and anything left field in terms of picks or honourable mentions. Survivors, unlike the other four classes, cannot lay claim, even partially, to having a primary stat that most typical investigators of their ilk lean towards. That's because most of them don't have a straightforward game plan. They are the masters of using whatever they have at their disposal and snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. Kicking things off with the assets, aka things you can touch, and here things you can hold in your hands. We have a few piece selections to choose from. It is fair to say that there was no way I wasn't starting this PowerPoint presentation of card art with anything other than the almighty Fire Axe. And for good reason. For one resource, you're getting an unlimited charge weapon of medium-sized destruction. The way it scales is just perfect. Take for example a 3 health enemy and you're sitting on a couple of resources. You'll pump your skill for the first attack and do it again for the second attack and say goodbye fugly. This was one of the all-star weapons in the early release cycles and it still holds its own today. You then have its cousin twice removed, the baseball bat. Taking up both hand slots this time and costing you $2, this would be the perfect weapon if it wasn't always one card draw away from ending up in the bin. +2 to skill and +1 damage is the benchmark for a great weapon. But if you're between 5 and 15% likely to lose it after every skill test, you want some way to mitigate the risk. Completing then the triumvirate of gruesome hand-to-hand weapons is the Meat Cleaver, a slightly more no risky, no bisky sharp-edged tool than the Fire Axe, but not really any less impactful. What you're getting for your extra resource cost is a guaranteed buff to your skill, but the problem is you'll probably want to pair this with some form of horror soak. Whilst it's all well and good donutting bin dippers in the face, at some point you're going to need to investigate, which is where Mariner's Compass comes in. Effectively the clue gatherer's Fire Axe, requiring you to sequence correctly and have a low to medium resource build. This obviously scales a bit better to multiplayer with extra clues to abuse its multi-clue snatching ability, but overall it's just a great card. Accompanying this little fella is a good card, the better than a flashlight old keyring. It gives you more charges for your buck and only uses up said charges if you succeed. Win-win, enough said. Moving on to the other slots, we're only hard recommending one accessory, and it is of course the foot of the rabbit. Now whilst this is not uber powerful, there is never much that's untoward about receiving a little bit of sweet after tasting the sour. In fact, this back foot approach is kind of the primary Survivor playstyle. Either get a bonus for failing or turn failing upside down to succeeding. They really do stand apart as a class in that regard. Survivors also have plenty of non-slot asset choices to choose from. We have here the first truly build-defining card Arkham Horror produced, Dark Horse. We've already seen how little to no resources can actually be a good thing for our red-bordered friends, and in some ways that also makes them the flip side to the rogue class. But seriously, this one card warrants a whole video by itself. But clearly you can see that a +1 buff across your stat line for 3 resources is no bad thing. But just as clearly, if you don't build around it, it starts to dilute its potency quick sharp. We then have the 6 costing level 3 on your own, which is more build enhancing or enabling than build defining, but it's no less powerful. Just think of the value you're receiving if you're an investigator that strongly encourages the use of events. The fact that it's permanent is what makes it solid gold, and I honestly can't think of any need for more explanation required as to why it's here on this list. And so before we move to the intangible, we need to talk about allies, and there's a couple we've picked to recommend. First up is Peter Silvestre, a card that might not look like much at first glance, especially for $3, but when you factor in that survivors can often rely on damage and horror soak, the fact that this guy self-heals horror and his upgraded version provides you with a passive bonus to both agility and willpower puts him over the top, especially for investigators who can make the most of said buffs. The other ally I wanted to touch on is Madame Labranche. A benefactress is certainly the best way to describe her, because if you've got no cards in hand or no money in your pocket, she's there with some friendly treats. And when you factor in that she doubles as some moderate damage and horror soak, all for the cost of just $2, then she clearly is the most convivial of hosts. As promised, we now move to the things you do, as opposed to the things you can see, in the form of events, and we've got quite a few to get through. In terms of encounter deck mitigation, we have the 3-cost Alter Fate. Now trust me when I say there will most always be some worthwhile scenario changing targets for this, although I much prefer the 3-cost upgraded version that doesn't stymie your tempo and provides a great deal better value. Don't get me wrong, there is a lot this doesn't deal with. It's not a cancel treachery card, but it's a definite consideration. A Test of Will is similarly bumpy. Its level 0 is not really quite good enough. If you've high native willpower, then its rep is enhanced, but the level 1 version asks the question, are you prepared to pay 1 XP each scenario for an oh crap, somebody save me card? And the level 2 version combines the pros and the cons of both. Once again, probably only worth it if you can reliably pass that willpower test. Then we have a couple of events that help you fight, and fight good. Act of Desperation isn't exactly an all-star, but if you've got cards in your deck that work with it, like multiple use charge items that are coming to the end of their shelf life, or when your deck has its fair share of recursion, then this card may well have a home. Fight or Flight is another neat card that can help mean the difference between a successful combat or evasion test. The main downsides are obviously that you don't really want to draw it early game, and then when it comes to fighting, there's no plus damage attached. Both of these entries are a little bit situational, but they can't all be god tier cards now, can they? We then discuss a couple of Chaos Token shenanigans in the form of the level 1 Butterfly Effect and the level 3 Catastrophe. The former, as you can see, allows you to turn back time and make a different choice once the Chaos bag has been rustled. The important part here is that it gives you freedom of choice. You didn't want to commit a card that may not have been needed because you want it for its body text? Fine, now you have the choice to change your mind. Just watched an impactful skill card push you way over the top? Then I'll take that back, thank you please. The latter is a slightly more situational security blanket, but still potent. Not only can it hoist up a weak primary stat, but how many times has that Cthulhu token ransacked an impactful test at precisely the wrong time? You'll appreciate the more you play how worthwhile this can often be within the framework of a walking the tightrope type of playstyle that you'll often be adopting playing Survivors. You then have your turning your nose up at failure cards. Lucky and Live and Learn are next to identical, although my preference is always the former. The reason being that you never have to concern yourself of any potential downside when you're using it reactively against an encounter card or other such bad things happens tests. If you're using this type of card more proactively on combat or intellect, then Live and Learn really does shine as it's cheaper. Just factor in the potential for spending XP in this direction, as there are 2 upgrades to the former, with the level 3 Lucky completely outshining its counterpart. All that aside, there is nothing to stop you running sets of both of these if you like the smell of winning after losing. You've then got the level 0 Look What I Found, which is slightly improved in multiplayer and is an all-star for low intellect survivors, and the level 2 version is absolutely brilliant in solo, which is not to ignore either's effectiveness at all player counts as well. The survivors have no shortage of impactful skill cards either. Brute Force is fan-dabby-dozy and can one-shot 3 health enemies. Resourceful would be used for anything but willpower tests, and is recursion on a non-corporeal stick. And Take Heart is the ultimate arm around your shoulder card that whispers, here, everything's going to be alright. Have 2 cards and 2 resources. There you go. Now, if only each class had this many awesome skill cards to choose from. So with any toolkit, there are going to be, at least in some people's minds, a list of notable absentees. And so we wrap up today's video with some honourable mentions and some I don't rate these as highly as others cards. 18 Derringer just cannot overcome its limited uses, even with the safety on. And Scavenging and or its upgraded version is too situational, but also well worth considering if you have a number of items that end up in the bin. Leather Coat and Cherished Keepsake and Perseverance are your soak cards. The first 2 would be my pick for investigators that really do walk the line and or benefit from being low on health and sanity. They also each have upgraded versions that are worth a look. But having an event that soaks big can also be situationally useful. Scrounge for Supplies again is another strong card, but never an auto include. Jot up the list of potential targets in the core of your deck and then decide whether this makes the cut. And don't forget to consider what might not be level 0 as you upgrade through a campaign as well. And then the skill card Survival Instinct is just that little bit too niche for me. Slightly better in multiplayer, but still firmly in the meh category. So there you have it, a semi-exhaustive look at all the cards you want to consider when building around your chosen survivor. Obviously, each investigator will lend itself and complement different cards, so keep an eye out for what your investigator is looking for in a cardboard buddy. You also might want to check out our previous videos to consider what off-class and neutral cards to take. But for now, I hope you found this helpful, and this is me telling you that this video is over.